Okay, if we're ready to go, we'll go ahead and begin. Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of July the 12th at 7 p.m. Our regular City Council meeting has been called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. I would ask at this time if all of you would join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 4, public comments for items not on tonight's agenda. Individuals will be allowed up to 3 minutes. It is council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. And so at this time, if you wish to speak, if you could raise your virtual hand, and I know I did receive that there might be somebody that we need to assist in bringing them in, but at this time, if we could please bring in each of the callers.
Okay, the first person I will be bringing in is Joe Yankee. Joe Yankee, can you hear us? Joe Yankee?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi.
Virginia.
It's actually Virginia. I'm a little nervous. I haven't done this before, but I have something to read. San Bruno, the city with the heart. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. San Bruno, the city with the heart. Specifically, the San Bruno Senior Center lunch program. We love going to the Senior Center. We first met our friends when the food was only available for pickup during COVID. It was a godsend. So when the center opened around July 2021, the friends we had met outside for over a year, we naturally wanted to continue our friendship and sit together. We were able to do that just fine until last week when suddenly our places were no longer there. The excuse we were given is that some people had complained that we got our food first since we were in the front. How petty and childish is this? We don't care if we get our food first, but we want to sit together. And here's why. We know that 6 or 7 of us are not only vaxxed, but boosted. That is important to us, particularly me. We all wear masks all the time. We don't want to sit near someone that we don't know their vaccination status, and we cannot ask. Myself and another person is at the table is very autoimmune deficient. We cannot afford to get COVID. I believe we are in the red tier now. On bingo days, particularly, people sit in their regular good luck seat. If we try to grab a few seats for our table mates, we are not welcome in their seat. If you are a bingo player, you understand this. Other days, it is impossible to get our seats together as we have done for better than a year. Somehow, the person making the rules changed that. Our little group of table mates is quite unhappy with the change of events. It is so hard about saving the table for us. We may not play bingo, but just bet we come together more regularly almost every single day than most of the other guests. We sit together, talk, laugh, and have fun together. Why was this changed? Because someone complained that they got their food 3 to 5 minutes after we got ours. Why did the boss change things and be influenced by a few? Many people have come to us and asked, what happened? Why aren't you in your regular table? We try to get our food and then leave when we can so that the groupie that comes from the senior board and care, the people there are 75 to 86 years old, can find a place when they have wheelchairs and walkers. They typically sit at the table after us so the caregiver can help them with their food. Now they have much difficulty finding a place together. Thanks for listening, and I will be giving the council an update if things change. If not, you might just see us sitting out in the hallway where we are welcome. San Bruno, the city with a heart, but the senior center is heartless. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Sandra M. Perez Vargas. Sandra, whenever you're ready.
Right under 3 minutes.
Sandra Perez Vargas.
Usually it's both of us.
Well, it was, but I changed it.
Sandra.
That sounds like the Yankee family's still on.
Yeah,
So what?
we're still. Thanks, Marty.
Sandra Perez Vargas, can you hear us? Sandra?
Well, why don't we move on to the next speaker, then we'll come back and make a final attempt.
Okay. Next speaker is Wesley Liu. Wesley?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So just to give a brief introduction, I'm Wesley. I'm a high school student. I've lived in San Bruno my whole life. And for the purposes of today, I'd like to give my public comment to shine a light on two key issues. Firstly, youth in the juvenile justice system, and secondly, giving youth a seat at the table. But firstly, on youth in the juvenile justice system. Now, I volunteer with the San Mateo County Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission, JJDPC, but I'm not speaking in any official capacity. And I also volunteer with the California Association of Youth Courts. But for today's purposes, I understand that the city of San Bruno refers juvenile offenders, slow offending misdemeanor youth, to this organization called North Peninsula Family Alternatives. Now, I haven't done too much research into them. However, I'd like to beg the City Council to consider a more restorative approach. Diversion and restorative justice are not the same thing. We can have restorative justice that diverts youth, and then we can have diversion, which is a probation officer meeting with the juvenile youth, or in this case, North Peninsula Family Alternatives, and then sending them off with occasional check-ins. That's diversion. However, restorative justice builds on that young person's strengths and tries to bolster them. So I urge the members of the City Council to deeply consider restorative justice. I know there's currently a few programs out there that are promoting restorative justice, including an organization called CarePoint, which currently gets referrals from San Mateo County Education and others like Sequoia Union High School District. So perhaps the City Council can consider that as well. But secondly, on youth having a seat at the table. Throughout my years, I've noticed that adults make all the decision making. While that is true and for the most part valid, when it comes to young people should at least be given a voice, either as an advisory role or preferably as perhaps a minority voting bloc, if that's at all possible. Not necessarily on the City Council, but again, I beg the City Council to consider, number one, establishing a youth commission or a youth advisory board, and number two, actually hearing youth and what the issues that are plaguing youth are in the city of San Bruno. Once again, I'm a lifetime San Bruno resident. I don't think I was born here because I don't think there's any hospitals there. But other than that, I mean, I've lived here my whole life, and I can tell you that giving youth a voice and highlighting youth issues are really important. As Senator Elizabeth Warren once said, if youth do not have a seat at the table, they are on the menu. Let that sink in for a moment, members of the City Council. So once again, I urge the City Council to consider a restorative justice approach to diversion and also giving youth a seat at the table. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other speakers at this time under public comment? For items not on the agenda.
No other hands are raised.
All right, thank you very much. We will move on to item number 5, announcements and presentations. We have our first announcement, which will be read by the, or discussed by the Director Wu, please. Sorry, that took me a moment to articulate that, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the City Council, Director Wu, I believe you're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Thank you. I've been talking to myself. Thank you for noticing it. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. So 5A announcement allows the City of San Bruno to continue our housing element survey, and the deadline has been extended to July 31st, 2022. Everyone's input will help us to better shape and understand the housing needs in the community. Please visit sanbruno.ca.gov/housing element survey. And we also have a QR code on the screen for those of you who want to take a picture and then take a survey right here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Wu. Appreciate it. Now we'll move on to item B, receive presentation of 4th of July fireworks, public safety operation results. We will have our two chiefs, Chief Johansson and Chief DeLay. Chief Johansson, I believe you're starting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. See if I can get my screen to expand here. As you mentioned, it'll be myself and Chief Ari DeLay with the Fire Department. Just talking briefly about the 4th of July Safety Operations Report. As you know, we provided a pre-safety operations report as to what our plans were, but every year we try to be quick in coming to council shortly after the 4th and delivering a presentation that highlights the calls for service, our results, and some other key points of interest for council and for the community. So that's what we'll be here to do this evening. First and foremost, I think it's important to talk about planning for the 4th of July. Like I said, we delivered a presentation previously that did some of this, but I do think it's helpful to kind of re-highlight here the work that goes into planning for hosting the 4th of July here in San Bruno. First of all, as has been mentioned many times before, all police department personnel are ordered to work on the 4th of July. This is a pretty big ask for a bunch of police officers who also have families like the rest of us, and I think especially for police officers who pride themselves as being a source of the freedom that is largely celebrated on the 4th of July, the fact that they spend each 4th of July working tirelessly for the community, I think is telling their commitment. We create a robust incident action plan, or IAP. This year, this was done joint with the fire department to ensure that we are not only conducting the best activities possible on the 4th, before the 4th, and after the 4th, but they were also well prepared for any major incidents that may stem from the celebrations on the holiday. Also created a joint fire and police public safety announcement, which was disseminated through various social media channels and through our website in an effort to educate the public about some of the challenges of the 4th of July. We conduct safety meetings with all of the fireworks booth operators to ensure that the booths, where there are obviously a large volume of fireworks, which can be dangerous, as well as cash and other sort of hazards, to make sure that those booth operators and their operations for these nonprofit groups are safe. We produce educational flyers that are provided with every single fireworks sale in an effort to make sure that people purchasing fireworks know what fireworks are legal to use within the city of San Bruno, when they can be used and when they cannot be used, and in an effort to dissuade them from using illegal fireworks. We provide informational warning notices to all city facilities so that folks who are passing through those can see some of the concerns about the 4th of July. We also have advanced police conduct at known violation locations. I've been working the 4th of July in San Bruno for almost 17 years now, and we do have some repeat violators, as I'm sure members of our community can attest to. And so we do make the effort in advance of the 4th of July to get out to those locations, put them on notice that we will be watching, and to try to gain some level of voluntary compliance with the laws. We also use data to focus resource deployment throughout the 4th of July, not only by looking at prior year data and calls for service, but actively during the 4th of July. As many in the public may have seen, we posted some real-time updates this year to social media during our 4th of July operation, which we are now running from a remote command post out in the field. We run that with a little bit of a ComStat approach to things, where we're looking at real-time calls for service, as well as the observations of officers and firefighters and other city staff working the street to ensure that we are being as responsive as possible to what is actually going on. We have dedicated enforcement details prior to the 4th of July because, as we know, a lot of folks do not wait for the 4th to start shooting off fireworks. And we have also enforcement after the 4th of July because they tend to not stop immediately following the 4th. In terms of 4th of July staffing, as mentioned before, we order all personnel to work. This year that equated to 50 staff. This includes officers, dispatchers, clerks, and community service officers, as well as command staff. All in all, it's about 36 sworn and 14 non-sworn that come into work the 4th of July. So I put that here to make sure there is some sort of context established as to the vast undertaking that it is to attempt to reduce the use of illegal fireworks on the 4th of July and the somewhat limited resources we have to do so here within our city. Many of these staff members work 16 consecutive hours. That is the maximum they are permitted to work in order to make the 4th of July detail as successful as possible. All of the beats also have to be staffed as usual, and that is because regular calls for service do not stop for a holiday. So we have to have the regular beat staffed in order to respond to normal, regular course of business calls to the police department, and then we deploy dedicated enforcement units to each of those beats as well. We use marked and unmarked units. Over the past several years, we have moved to almost all unmarked units, at least within the resources available to us, because they're notably more successful in making apprehensions and seizing illegal fireworks than the very visible and obvious marked units. This is important to note here because if you called and provided a complaint on the 4th of July and felt that the police were not in your neighborhood or you never saw them, the reality is that the hope is that you would not have seen them as they're going through conducting their enforcement activities. And this also includes uniformed and plainclothes personnel. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those tactics. Undercover surveillance has been our key methodology that we've implemented the last couple of years that has actually produced better results, at least in my opinion. This ensures we have people who are not easily identifiable as police officers out in the high volume areas of illegal fireworks use who are making observations, relaying those observations to marked and uniformed units to then come in and seize fireworks and issue citations. This model is a lot more effective than just deploying cars driving around attempting to find the violations in progress. There are also dedicated fire department staff, which Chief DeLay will talk about a bit later in the presentation. But it's not even just police and fire. There are dedicated parks department staff and dedicated streets department staff who are burdened with providing services in association with not only the 4th of July operation itself, but the cleanup after the fact. We're very, very grateful for the services they provide as well. In terms of background, the 4th of July presents a lot of safety challenges, not just illegal fireworks. The use of illegal fireworks is obviously the most visible, and this goes on during, before, and after the 4th of July. Important to note that it's not just a matter of the nuisance, right? The noise is very real for many of these illegal fireworks in terms of how it impacts not only residents, but their animals in many cases, and is particularly disturbing for folks who are suffering from post-traumatic stress injury. Very, very difficult, for example, to be a veteran who has served your country and gone through some of the things you have, and then to feel as though you are in somewhat of a similar environment with hearing explosions all throughout the 4th of July and the surrounding days. It's also a significant risk of injury. We did not have any noted this year, but we have had them in the past that are associated with the use of illegal fireworks. Obviously, illegal fireworks and safe and sane, if not properly used, present fire hazards, which is why our dedicated fire department staff is on hand. And we also tend to have problems with large, unruly gatherings on the 4th of July. Those tend to be accompanied by increased alcohol use associated with parties. It can be problematic for the police when we are trying to keep those parties within reasonable manners, and also at the same time, in some cases, having to conduct enforcement with people who are inebriated. So we engage expansive education, prevention, and enforcement operations every year. These are funded by safe and sane fireworks sales taxes that are imposed on the booths for the sale of the safe and sane fireworks. Very, very important to note, because as you'll see in a couple of slides, the enforcement activities that are conducted here are well in excess of what are conducted in most other cities here on the peninsula, many of which have equal or even worse problems with illegal fireworks. So it is important to note that the operations I'm speaking about this evening are funded by the safe and sane fireworks sales. Nonetheless, I'm here to absolutely acknowledge that does not stop rampant illegal fireworks use. I would argue that this is in fact not stoppable, it is only reducible. There is no action your police department can take that will result in the complete eradication of the use of illegal fireworks in association with 4th of July celebrations. And other cities have similar challenges. So these are some fireworks-related calls for service on the 4th of July this year. Here in San Bruno, we had 179. South San Francisco actually had more at 188. They do not have dedicated enforcement, and they do not have a funding source for enforcement because they do not have safe and sane fireworks sales. East Palo Alto had 131. San Mateo had 122. These agencies are highlighted here because they are other agencies in the county that tend to report significant problems with 4th of July illegal fireworks use. Daly City at 95. Important to note that none of these cities allow safe and sane fireworks, and none of them have a funding source for large-scale enforcement like that you see here in San Bruno. Generally, these agencies do not respond to fireworks complaints. on the 4th of July. So if you call to complain that illegal fireworks are being utilized because they do not have dedicated enforcement units and they're busy with regular calls for service, they generally will not respond to those complaints with an actual officer being deployed unless there is some sort of immediate safety issue articulated that merits such response. Calls for service for us this year. We had 277 calls for service on the 4th of July. That's significantly higher than a normal day where we tend to average somewhere in the neighborhood of about 120 to 160 calls for service. This was one more than last year in 2021, so pretty on par with the 4th of July. The peak activity period was from 8:30 to 11. There were 179 fireworks-related calls. So of those 277, 179 of them are related to some sort of fireworks complaint, either improper use of safe and sane or illegal fireworks usage. That was 3 fewer than last year, so again, really no big difference, pretty much on pace with what we experienced last year. Again, like most previous years, most of these reports are vague and marginally workable for the police department. I highlight this here just to mention that as much as I can understand the frustration of our community, if you call in to tell us there are aerial fireworks going off on a city block or in a given neighborhood, there's very little that the police department can do to actually convert that into enforcement activities that are particularly effective given the limited window of time and the limited staff we have available to conduct that enforcement. We are happy to respond directly to calls that are really specific about individuals that are using illegal fireworks and to act within our legal means to conduct enforcement. But the vast majority of these reports every year are really not particularly workable from an intelligence standpoint. Remember that officers have to on-view violations in order to issue a citation. This means they have to actually witness the violation in such a way that they can be completely certain of who it is that possessed and or lit the illegal firework. It is not enough for a resident to call in and say, I know that my neighbor is shooting them off. We will respond out to that and do the best we can to conduct those observations. But if we don't conduct them directly, we are unable to legally issue the citation. Observationally, and I will tell you that I worked the entire 4th of July detail from about noon till about 2 in the morning. Illegal fireworks was actually lighter this year than in the last 2 years. Now, that being said, the last 2 years were notably heavier in terms of illegal fireworks use. Again, this is just anecdotally from my own observations, but this year did seem notably lighter. I'm sure that if you're a resident that experienced rampant usage in your area, that is not pleasing information to hear from me, but I nonetheless want to make sure that I set some context. We also had fewer unruly gatherings and parties than are typical, which is obviously a welcome sort of change. In terms of enforcement, we issue administrative citations when someone is caught using or possessing illegal fireworks. This is a $1,000 fine. Every year we receive some input from the community that, this should be a $5,000 fine, or why can't it be much higher? It's important to note that this is the highest allowable by law. And in most cases, you would have sort of a graduating scale. You would begin at a lower violation amount, and in subsequent violations, you would increase it. But because the problem has been so significant here for the community of San Bruno, we move immediately to the highest available amount for that citation, which is $1,000. Again, the citing officer has to directly observe the violation. They have to then safely detain the violator. And it's important to note here that this is a municipal code infraction, essentially, that is resulting in an administrative violation or administrative citation. So we have to be very careful how much we're willing to compromise the safety of the officers and the public to effect these citations and arrests. At the end of the day, we don't want anyone getting hurt over what is the issuance of an administrative citation, and so we take measures to make sure that that is not the case. The violator does have to be cited and not physically arrested. Can certainly answer further questions about that moving forward. But again, this is an administrative citation, which means they're not going to jail. They're going to receive a citation and be released there from the scene. Only evidence in plain view of the officers can be seized. This is problematic because we may see someone light off, for example, an aerial firework and succeed in observing it and making the arrest and issuing the citation. And if they have more illegal fireworks inside the house, we do not have the legal capability to simply walk into someone's house and take those fireworks. So oftentimes the illegal fireworks use will continue even after someone has been cited. Either they continue to do it themselves or someone else within their group does it. And unfortunately, there's little that can often be done about seizing all of those fireworks at once. We do take aims to attempt to do so via consent and encouraging people to turn in their illegal fireworks so they don't end up with more citations. But that's about as far as we can go in that regard. Resident-provided video, which has become more available over the last several years, of course, can be used to help us identify suspects, but it cannot replace that in-presence legal requirement for a citation to be issued. That question gets asked most years, which is why I include it here. The video is useful to us in building evidence. but we can't simply use the video and then go issue a citation. It is worth noting that the Muni Code does allow us to cite a person in control of a gathering where illegal fireworks are being repeatedly used, as long as we can prove that that individual knew or should have reasonably known that they were being used, allowing them to continue being used. We normally accomplish this at large gatherings by going and issuing a warning to the homeowner or the person in control of that gathering, letting them know that if the illegal fireworks there continue and we can't determine exactly who's lighting them off, that we do have the ability to and the willingness to hold them accountable with a $1,000 citation. So here's some enforcement data from this year and from years prior. This year, the San Bruno Police Department issued 25 administrative citations for possession and or use of illegal fireworks on the 4th of July. We also made 2 physical custodial arrests that stemmed from fireworks violations but turned into more serious charges when the people being arrested chose courses of action other than cooperation. You can see that as this compares to other years, in 2020 we had a kind of a banner year of citations, if you will, with 38 being issued. But the number 25 this year would otherwise be tied for the second highest we have issued since 2014. This is significant in that the window in which the illegal fireworks are being used on a scale that we can really get out and be effective enforcing it is tightening and becoming somewhat shorter, which is good, but does make it a bit harder, and as have our resources. And we'll talk a little bit about what those resources look like, but I think comparatively it was a fairly active year for the police enforcement activities. Again, this is about 8 more than were issued last year, the second most ever issued, the equivalent of what was issued in 2018. And we have about this is about 7 per hour being issued during the peak period of illegal fireworks usage. And bear in mind that this is using really minimal units, so most of those units are issuing multiple citations per hour. And it is not as simple as issuing the citation and then moving on to another citation, right? This ends up being a case that has to be investigated, so they've got to seize fireworks, take the time required in the street to take photographs, issue a citation to the resident or the person committing the violation, and then bring the fireworks and evidence back to the mobile command post in order to have them logged into property and secured as evidence for the case in the future if there are appeals. So every actual citation takes a considerable amount of time. Of the 25 people cited this year, 12 were San Bruno residents. This is roughly on pace with most years. It usually is about half of the individuals who are cited are San Bruno residents and about half are not. They are people who have come into the city and are lighting off illegal fireworks here but do not live here. We also seized about 179 pounds of live illegal fireworks this year. This is a very high number. In fact, it's about 150 pounds more than the annual average. A lot of these came from one particular seizure, but nonetheless, it is a lot of illegal fireworks being seized, notably more than in average years. And we also seized about 125 pounds of spent fireworks, spent illegal fireworks. This does not include the cleanup of safe and sane. Here are some preliminary cost estimates in terms of what it takes in order to run these operations associated with the 4th of July. You can see the police department's public service announcement with the PD and fire department had a cost of about $1,400. Community services added additional staff on the 4th of July at a cost of about $1,300. The fire department has fire marshal administrative and inspection hours invested in 4th of July, which is about $5,700. They also provide additional staffing and logistics for the 4th of July itself to ensure they are prepared for the fire mitigation that comes with it, at about $13,000. The 4th of July staffing and logistics for the police department at about $33,000. The pre and post 4th of July education and enforcement operations and logistics about $6,200. And public works cleanup costs, really labor and equipment associated with cleaning up fireworks that participants choose not to clean up on their own, at about $4,700. Please disregard the missing FD info statement at the bottom. That should have been deleted out of the presentation, but you see the total of about $66,300 for the operation as a whole. Again, reminder that these costs are covered by fees collected from safe and sane fireworks sales. And now I will kick it over to Chief Ari DeLay to cover some of the fire operations associated with this year's 4th of July. Ari?
Great. Thank you, Chief Johansson. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, Ari DeLay, your fire chief. Thank you for having Chief Johansson and myself this evening to present our operational report for the 4th of July. And I'll cover the fire department's operation. Just a brief overview, our staffing for the evening for the 4th of July. We do staffing for the day of, but we also provide some significant resources in the days obviously preceding when it comes to inspection of those booths and enforcement of the that do sell fireworks for the 4th. For the day of, I myself as the fire chief was there the entire day to help support the mission. We had one additional chief officer on staff to be able to support the mobile command post and allow the normal duty BC to run daily routine calls. Also, we had all of our fire prevention staff on duty to provide enforcement and education for the previous days and then again for the evening of the 4th. And we did staff one additional ALS resource, and we utilized the Cal OES Type 6 that we have here assigned to the City of San Bruno as a more light and agile resource that we could deploy easily through the neighborhood and if we were to get a grass fire in our jurisdiction. And our total staffing for the evening was 3 engines and the truck and 1 EC. And if I can have the next slide, please. Great. So calls for service. From 0800 to 8 o'clock in the morning the next morning, we had 26 calls for service on the 4th, and it's a slight decrease from last year. As Chief Johansson alluded to, our overall takeaway from this 4th was is a bit lighter than in previous years, and our peak activity was very similar to the police departments from approximately that 8:30 time to 11. And if anybody noticed, it was late. It was light, pretty late that evening. So it took some time before people really got a little out of hand with the fireworks. And if I could get the next slide, please. Our calls for service. And I just want to note for myself, we wanted to make sure that the calls for service attributed to fireworks were actually confirmed fireworks issues that we dealt with. Although we had an increase of fire-related calls during the week preceding the 4th of July, we had no real attributable fireworks calls those previous days. We did, however, the evening of the 4th of July have 3 incidents that were definitely attributed. 2 were relatively small. We had 2 small trash fires, but we did have 1 grass fire near the train tracks near Lions Field out there in the Bel Air neighborhood. And if I could get the next slide, please. Overall, our observations, the illegal fireworks was pretty consistent with prior years, maybe slightly down. Our normal education and prevention efforts are obviously critical to make sure that people are safe. And then we had obviously a significant desire from the community to make sure that our weed abatement efforts were sustained and taken care of. So our fire prevention staff was pretty on top of the weed abatement complaints that came through the fire department that typically ramp up during the 4th of July season. And the most important one, we had no injuries due to the 4th of July activities, which is obviously an important item for us. And if I could have the next slide. And myself and Chief Johansson will be available for any questions that you may have. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, both chiefs, for your information and presentation. Do we have questions from council in regards to the presentation? Mr. Hamilton, Councilmember Hamilton, sorry.
No questions, just a very quick comment. I just want to thank the whole team, the whole public safety team for all their hard work and extra hours for the 4th of July. I want to especially say thank you for the social media presence during the evening of the 4th. We saw that there were several live videos posted on Instagram by both chiefs and from other members of both public safety teams, keeping the public aware of the operations that were happening as they were happening on the 4th, and I felt that was really really helpful and a nice example of community building. So I wanted to commend the team for all that. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time from colleagues? Let's see members of the public have any comments? And repeat if you could assist me.
I see Tim O'Brien has his hand raised. I will now bring him in. Tim O'Brien?
Yes, hello.
Hello. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chief, both Chiefs, Police and Fire, for your presentations, and for your hard work during this 4th of July. To me, this 4th of July, as far as illegal fireworks in our area, ranging from Huntington, from San Felipe to the avenues, was horrendous. It was one of the worst. We've been here 8 years. It was one of the worst for illegal fireworks. It was just awful. Pre-4th of July, it was pretty bad. After, it was going out until 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had 2 dogs and a cat, and it wasn't. They endured it. We made them feel as comfortable as possible, but it was awful. And the debris. I went to work the next morning, going down Angus and seeing all the aftermath was just awful to see and horrendous. And I just felt bad for the environment. Our air quality, I'm sure, was horrible. So, but hats off to you, to the fire and the police department. It's a big challenge. Once a year, I know, or no, probably more than once a year. But through all the dates and stuff, it's a challenging time. So, I know resources are not there, and I know if we have resources, services can get better. So, I appreciate what you work with and how you execute things. But yeah, it was awful. I thought it was like sticks of dynamite. It was like World War III here in our area. It was one of the worst times. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you for comments. Any other speakers, please?
No other hands are raised.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the council for any comments. Seeing no other hands, then I was just going to say a couple things. What I did do is there's certainly, I'm sure all my colleagues received some calls, texts, or emails in regards to the noise level or the latest of the hours of the illegals, or over by parks like by 7th Avenue that had a lot of debris, as Mr. Bryan had mentioned, of folks for illegals that didn't obviously shouldn't be doing it and left it. What I did do is I reached out to the cities of Foster City, San Mateo, South San Francisco, and Pacifica, the mayors, and we had text 2 others, just Millbrae as well as San Carlos, to get their perspective of what their community faced, just to get a perspective. And I will tell you that there were challenges based on the mayor's information, and this was on July 5th. So they didn't have all the specific data at that point, but just to get a perspective. And so they were experiencing some of the same things that we've heard here tonight. Doesn't make it better, doesn't make it easier, and I get that. What I did do is, since there was no ride along, I went ahead and actually were texting people within areas of the community just to get a gauge on how it was into the hours. And some parts of our community obviously had it worse than others. I normally am at the briefing, and I know some of my colleagues would be and have been. And so I think all of us would here say thank you to public safety, public works, parks, and all those folks that do that, because obviously they may have wanted the opportunity to be home with their families or having a long weekend. And they were here for our community and did a good job, and obviously protected us, and we appreciate it. So please pass that. I couldn't do that night, or wasn't there. It wasn't. So I'm taking that opportunity now, but I can tell you some of my colleagues would have been there as well, and I think they would also want to share that. I'm sure they will concur with my statement. All right, with that, thank you very much, and appreciate it. And we move on to consent. Item number 6. All items are considered routine or implemented in an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion There will be no separate discussion unless requested. We have items 6A through 6E. Is there anyone that wishes to have a separate vote on one of those items? Is there any council member that wants to have a comment or question on any of those items? Seeing and hearing none, is there, before we vote, are there any members of the public that wish to have any comments on the consent?
No hands are raised.
Thank you. Back to council for action, please, on consent.
Through the mayor, I'll make a,
Sorry.
go ahead.
You two can trade off.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Tom. Take it.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the items on the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Motion Hamilton, seconded Salazar. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. Consent passes 5-0. Thank you all. Now we'll move on to item 7, conduct of business.
Item 7A, authorize the city manager to enter into municipal services agreement with Artichoke Joe's for reimbursable services from a police detective and payment of $225,000 per quarter from Artichoke Joe's to the city of San Bruno.
Thank you very much, and we will turn it over to the city manager, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council, Javon Grogan, City Manager. I will provide our presentation tonight. I will also be supported by Interim City Attorney Trish Ortiz, who will share the PowerPoint. And so we will begin momentarily.
Can you see the PowerPoint, Mayor and City Council members? Thank you.
Yes.
So if we can go to the next slide, our outline and objective tonight is to discuss background, the proposed municipal services agreement, and recommendations. Artichoke Joe's, as we all know, is a card room within the city of San Bruno with over 100 years of service. The card room first opened up in 1916 as Joe's Pool Parlor. And
Excuse me, I apologize. Is the slides, is that moving forward or is it just me?
Ms. Ortiz, can you advance to the next slide? Yeah.
Okay, so has it not
You might be sharing the wrong screen. We're seeing the PowerPoint screen, not the presentation.
Okay, let me stop sharing and fix that.
Thank you.
Let me may be able to. Perfect. Okay.
Perfect.
So,
okay.
Yes. So the card room has been in existence in San Bruno for over 100 years. Started as Joe's Pool Parlor in 1916. So as a part of this conversation, we'll talk a little bit about the background. We will discuss the proposed municipal service agreement and discuss the recommended action. Next slide. So if we go back to October 26, 2021, the City Council, prior to that date, actually had a strategic initiative related to a comprehensive fiscal sustainability project and sought to look for additional revenues citywide to address the city's financial challenges. On October 26, 2021, the City Council held a study session to discuss numerous potential ballot measures for November 2022. And one of those items was look at and examine the potential increase in the city's card room tax. And so next slide. So in 2020, in furtherance of City Council direction, staff met with Artichoke Joe's. There's significant data that's needed for that process. And we routinely meet to discuss card room operations, the impact on the city, various state and local regulations impacting the operations of a card room, and also payments to the city from the card room. And through those discussions, it was actually Artichoke Joe's that recommended that we amend what we'll discuss shortly, which was a prior cost recovery agreement, and develop a municipal services agreement and put that before the City Council that would increase payments to the city. And so if we go to the next slide, it's important to note that in 2012, the city and Artichoke Hills met to discuss cardroom operations, impact of the cardroom on the city, and the increasingly complex landscape that is required by the city in regulation of the cardroom. At that time, the city and the cardroom agreed that the city would assign a police detective that would primarily handle issues related to Artichoke Hills, and the cardroom would reimburse the city for the full cost of that police detective, including future MOU increases. And that agreement was entered into in 2012, and it was entitled a cost recovery agreement. As we move forward, and I mentioned earlier in 2022, the city staff and Artichoke Hills met, and we arrived at a mutually agreeable municipal services agreement that we are providing to the city council for action tonight. And that agreement provides a number of items that I'll go through now. The first is continuation of assigning a police detective to Artichoke Hills to handle issues related to the cardroom. Additionally, there would be a commitment by the casino to train and familiarize the city and that detective with cardroom operations, all of their various games played, current, existing, and new, as well as their current security and surveillance measures in place. It's actually critically important that we have that detailed information from Artichoke Hills and have a inside view on how they in the city, how they work to keep their customers safe. And that's similar to the next one, a mutually agreed upon coordination on additional safety and security measures to protect both customers and the public from incidents of violence. We discussed in their primary points of contact that casino operators will have with the police department to address any operational issues. There's also an agreement that cardroom staff and city administrative staff would meet on a regular basis, both the chief of police and the city manager with cardroom representatives. A continuation of a full reimbursement of the police detective's costs, salary and benefits, as well as a payment of $225,000 per quarter for a total of $900,000 per fiscal year, and that would increase annually. Next slide. Just to bring together the total. And so what we have on this slide is the city's current cardroom tax is projected to bring in $2.28 million in revenue. That is the existing authorized cardroom tax. The proposed municipal services agreement has two components. It's continuation of the police detective as well as the annual payment of $900,000. In total, that is $3.38 million to the city. It is also important to note that while that detective is assigned to Artichoke Hills, if there is a operational need of the police department, that detective can be reassigned temporarily to other duties, and that happens periodically. And so there is a benefit to the city for that position. There are also termination provisions within the agreement that is before the city council. These are actually different than the termination provisions that are currently active in the cost recovery agreement. That current agreement essentially provides for a 12-month termination clause. It provides for a 2-year cost recovery agreement, but the cardroom can exit that agreement with 12 months notice during that 2-year term. This agreement is stronger, but also provides areas where should significant changes occur, the cardroom can terminate the agreement. One is if the cardroom ceases to operate within the city of San Bruno. The next one is if the tables upon which they pay the tax is reduced to less than 35 tables for a period of 24 months. Currently, the cardroom operates 43 tables. This is in here because there, in theory, is the possibility for the state and or the city to reduce the number of allowable tables, and that will certainly impact their revenue and their agreement and their ability to pay the amount that's within this agreement. Prior 2 years notice, so prior to July 1, 2027, the cardroom has the right to terminate the agreement upon 2 years advance notice if the city imposes additional financial obligations upon the card room equal to 50% or more than the annual payment. And so 50% of the initial annual payment is $450,000, and noting that increases by CPI. I think there's a typo in that print. Also, after July 2027 or thereafter, the Artichoke Joe's will be terminated upon 2 years' notice. It's important to note that if we go back to the prior slide, when you add in the card room tax and the annual payment, that is approximately $75,000 in revenue that the city would receive per operating table. That is on par with our analysis of what other card rooms in the area receive, and so that it would bring total revenue to the city more in line with what I would say the marketplace locally. And then if we advance back to slide 9, the recommended action for the city is to authorize the city manager to enter into a municipal services agreement with Artichoke Joe's for reimbursable services for a police detective, as well as payment of $225,000 per quarter from the Artichoke Joe's to the city. There are, of course, alternatives. The city council cannot authorize the city manager to enter into that agreement, or you can provide additional direction on desired amendments to the agreement. That concludes the presentation. Myself and City Attorney Ortiz are available for any questions the City Council may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Manager. Appreciate the information and the presentation. First, we'll go to Council for any questions on the presentation, then we'll open to public, and then we'll come back for Council for final comments, deliberation, and or action. Council, questions on presentation, please. Not seeing any at this time. Let's go ahead and go to the, see if members of the public wish to comment.
I will now be bringing in Tim O'Brien. Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. This is great news for the city. I'm really happy. Actually, my wife and I are very happy about this, and it's exciting. I mean, I'm glad this transaction or agreement happened. It's going to be great for the city because other services will be can be administered or improved. But one thing that we've been talking about for many years is the downtown, and hopefully, you know, the council would consider using this money to improve our downtown, and by improving it and beautifying it would bring in more business. I mean, there's a lot of empty spaces in the downtown, and I would think it would bring business, more business to come downtown and set up, and also would improve the foot traffic if we make it a nice, inviting avenue. It would be great. And, you know, like, I know we're talking about Centennial Park, the improvements there. We'd like to see that. I mean, and the community day was just an awesome, nicely organized. It was a great time, and I hope we have more of those, and so we can enjoy our downtown and, you know, see more foot traffic. That'll bring in more revenue, more taxes, more revenue for the city, and we can use it for other services in the city. And that's all I have. Thank you so much again.
Thank you for your comments. Other speakers, please.
Okay, the next person I'll be bringing in is Nancy Foreman. Nancy, can you hear us?
All right, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, whenever you're ready.
I want to echo what Tim O'Brien said. I think this is wonderful, and thank you to everyone involved in making this happen. I'd also like to see this money allocated to our downtown. Artichoke Joe's, after all, is downtown, and what better way to support them if they're supporting the city of San Bruno than to see that money allocated to improving our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Okay, next speaker I will be bringing in is Claudia Quinn. Claudia, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. We also would like to urge the City Council to pass this and also to spend the money from Artichoke on the downtown improvement. The Community Foundation survey showed downtown was important to many of us. We feel strongly that Artichoke Joe's money should help beautify the downtown. The merchants there are neighbors of Artichoke Joe's, often impacted by traffic and parking, and they deserve the attention and care. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
No other hands are raised.
Okay, thank you. We will bring it back to City Council for comments,
Is that okay?
deliberation, and our action. Okay, we have a shy council. Oh, Councilmember Hamilton.
I unmuted. If there isn't going to be any, oh, here we go. I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
The Vice Mayor's hands up.
And I'll pause and we'll circle back if that comes. Vice Mayor, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Artichoke Joe's. I think that this was originally placed as I would say a little bit of a separate item by myself on the agenda. So I wanted to really thank Artichoke Joe's for coming to the table. I want to thank the council members who did support this initiative that's now resulting in almost $1 million, actually over $1 million to our city every year. So I think these are good faith efforts on Artichoke Joe's behalf. I think it was one of these opportunities for the council to make a true impact on our city in a way that was fair and in a way that brought revenue that was desperately needed. And I hope we listen to public comments that we heard tonight around reinvesting those funds in our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Medina.
Yes. First, a full disclosure. I met with Artichoke Joe's management, Vincent DeFraze. That's pronounced that right. I apologize otherwise. And Cody Samet late last year, after the discussion to increase card room taxes was publicly discussed. I am a member of Rotary, and I coach AJ's Pee Wee baseball team, so I do encounter Mr. Samet various times, but I could say that I did meet with him today. Note, during these meetings, the terms of the agreement were not discussed. All of the negotiations were handled by staff. So with that said, I want to commend staff, the council, for looking at other ways to increase revenues to our city, because we know that we have so many things that we want to do, and unfortunately we just don't have the resources to do as much as we would like. So when this was initially proposed, it eventually got us to where we are today. I appreciate the comments from the public regarding reinvesting those dollars into the downtown, but we also have many needs. So I just wanted to share that and thank everybody for getting us to this point where we are today, where we're looking at potentially $900,000 more and the police officer services in this agreement. So thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I just wanted to, and staff, you don't need to come on line if I'm okay, or you can please to correct me. The police officer has been ongoing, so that's not new. That's a continuation. What happened, frankly, is the state mandated it at one point, and then it was not required, but Artichoke Joe's continued to do that. And so we appreciate that because they have been paying for an officer for some time. I as well have run into Vincent in his community when I was at an event. I've run into Cody through the time from his father to today. So I do periodically run into him and have also eaten there or grab food to go. So I will run into them. So I want to have that as full disclosure as well. So anyway, with no other comments, may I ask if I can go back to Councilmember Hamilton?
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. I would like to echo my colleagues' comments. This is something that we've been looking at, as noted in the staff report, for a while. I know it's something that our Vice Mayor has been championing, and I'm glad to see it come to a great conclusion. So I'm very happy to make a motion to authorize City Manager to enter into the Municipal Services Agreement with Artichoke Joe's for reimbursable services for a police detective and payment of $225,000 per quarter from Artichoke Joe's to the City of San Bruno.
Second.
Motion Hamilton, seconded Marty Medina. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Big yes. Thank you.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Yes. With that, I want 5-0 to approve. And again, I want to thank staff, and I want to thank Artichoke Joe's, Samet family, who's been there for this community. Will continue, and I really do appreciate that, and I think it just shows sitting down and having a discussion at the table with good partners, stakeholders is more. So with that, we will now move on to item 8, public hearing.
8A, application to allow interim automobile sales and inventory storage at the former Sears building at the Tanfran Mall. 1178 El Camino Real, APN 014-316-330, PD 22-02, PDP 22-03, Bay Area AG Inc. hold public hearing to consider waiving first reading and introducing an ordinance amendment to Ordinance 1087 that regulates land uses at the Shops at Tanfran Mall, allowing interim auto sales use and inventory storage at the former Sears building, and adopting a resolution approving the planned development permit PDP for use of former Sears building. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA environmental review pursuant to CEQA Guidelines Class 1, Section 15301, which recognizes proposed operation and leasing of existing facilities.
Thank you very much. And before we continue and begin with Director Wu, I need to read something, or I'm going to make a statement. My residence is located between 500 and 1,000 feet of the project site. I've determined that the requested entitlements will not change my property's development potential, income producing potential, highest and best use, market value, or character by substantially altering traffic levels, intensity of use, parking view, privacy, noise levels, or air quality, and thus I will participate in the discussion of this item. It's also important to note that the actual area to where the proposed interim auto sales use would be is permitted outside the 1,000, so it's beyond 1,000 feet from my property, further reinforcing that a proposal would not have a monetary financial effect on my property. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is Pamela Wu, Community and Economic Development Director with the City. With me tonight is Brian Millard, a planning consultant who's working on the project. We will be walking you through the project. Brian, if you can pull up the presentation, and also kind of guide you through the history of Tanfran, and we will pull up the recommended action at the end, given that Lupita had a mouthful to read, so we'll remind you again of the action. Next slide. So the objective for tonight, as I mentioned, is to highlight the recommended actions, and there will be 2 actions before you, to walk you through the background of the site, how the mall came to where it is today, and then to outline the proposed project as an interim use from the permanent auto dealership that's currently being processed of its planning entitlement, and then to outline the key considerations for City Council tonight and conclude our presentation with next steps and answer any questions that you may have. Next slide. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are 2 actions before Council tonight. The first action is to hold a public hearing to introduce read by title only and to waive further reading of an ordinance amendment for Ordinance 1087 that regulates land uses at the shops at Tanfran Mall to allow interim auto sales and inventory storage. And the second action is to hold a public hearing and to adopt a resolution approving a planned development permit, a PDP, for the use of the former Sears building. Next. So we'll talk a little bit about background. So let's talk about the site. This may not come to you as a too unfamiliar spot. So we're talking about the Tanfran Mall to the north of Highway 380. And really the reason for tonight's application is to find an interim home for this permanent dealership that will house both Hyundai and Genesis on the vacant site at the crossing across from the this Tanfran shopping mall. And the particular use will be revitalizing the Sears building to the north of the Tanfran Mall, both the Sears department store area as well as the auto center. I think that was previously used for a tire center and also auto-related services. Next slide. With that said, how the mall came to be where it is today is it started off with a planned development district approval that the City Council approved in 1966. It got codified through Ordinance 1087, which allowed for the approval of Tanfran. The construction then started in 1971, which included Sears, JCPenney, Emporium, which later on turned into a Target in 1996. Through the years, there has been major renovation. Most notably is the movie theater expansion 2003. And most recently, you'll remember Planet Fitness Center was augmented into the mall, and with the food court and other renovation that has been taking place over the past 10 years or so. Next slide. As it was recognized in the CCNR, adopted as part of the 1969 approval to allow for automobile sales agency, amongst other wide range of commercial uses. It's recognizable that the CCNR is not an official planning entitlement to allow for inter-auto uses. So the developer has recognized and requested a PDP and also a PD amendment to temporarily establish the dealership at the Tanfran Mall. Again, this will be an interim establishment before the permanent facility has finished construction. Next slide. This gives you an idea of what the current state of the Sears buildings look like. These pictures were taken about 2 months ago. So the picture to the left upper corner will be the entrance to the Sears building, where this will be renovated to include the dealership logo. There will not be any exterior modification other than installing signage. The picture to the right is the ramp towards the rear of the building, where inventory vehicles will be shipped in and also rolled in. And also the picture on the bottom is the auto center, where repair or services, maintenance for Hyundai and Genesis that will take place in the previous Sears building. So with that said, I'm going to turn the remainder of the presentation to Brian to walk you through the project outline and then also the key considerations. Brian?
Thank you. And good morning. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Brian Milano, project mayor of the city. So I'll talk next pretty briefly about the project overview. As Pamela noted, we're looking at a proposal for interim auto dealerships on the Genesis that will occupy the former Sears building at the shops at Tanfran. This this would include a ancillary auto inventory storage use, some on the ground floor, but most down in the basement area that provide for sales for both of the dealerships. And as Pamela noted, we also have automobile servicing in the adjacent former Sears Tire Center. There is no physical expansion of buildings that's proposed. There would be some new exterior paint and signs. Most everything else is just minor interior upgrades and the like. And as noted, this is a proposed interim use, not permanent. So if approved, this would be for a 5-year interim period while the dealership group pursues a home for a new and permanent dealership, which would be across the street to the west, across El Camino Real, down by the corner of El Camino Real and the I-380 near the westbound on-ramp, just south of Jax by way of location. So 3 primary use aspects: automobile sales first, ground floor use primarily for the 2 dealerships, some vehicle storage, maybe 7 or so cars is what the applicant intends on that ground floor. Otherwise, administrative areas would make the lion's share of that space. We'd have automobile inventory storage, most down in the basement, and collectively the applicants can have anywhere from 2 to up to 300 vehicles at any given time in the facility. Access to that basement area, to that storage area, would be via a movable ramp that would be installed with the back roll-up doors at the existing roll-up doors at the back side of the Sears building. And then lastly, again, automobile servicing for Honda and Genesis at the former Tire Center. Some of the operational details for auto sales: the applicant estimates about 30 employees. Will operate 7 days a week, varying hours that you can see here on the screen. And then automobile servicing would operate Monday through Saturday from 7:30 to 6. The servicing aspect is anticipated to have about 20 employees. The main entry to the auto sales building would be on the west side of the former Sears building, facing El Camino Real. There's a restroom that's located down in the basement level. There's dedicated parking spaces in the adjacent surface lot, just outside that main entrance to the former Sears building. And then the applicant has indicated that, again, we would have most of the automobiles stored down below, but would be some on that first floor, sort of ground floor level, and then vehicles are displayed for sale, certainly. And then those vehicles would be brought in and out of that ground floor space via some rear doors that undergo some minor modification, not enlargement. Just need to make the glass entry doors, the frame a little bit larger, so a vehicle can pass through. And a few more pictures here on the upper left. The exterior surface parking lot looking towards the main entrance. And then off to the right, this is actually on the basement. This is a view towards the inside of those roll-up doors, where most vehicles, actually all the vehicles, would be coming in for storage. And then down below here, this is the existing truck delivery bay towards the back side of the building. Trucks roll down this ramp, and you can see the roll-up doors down here. Floor plans provided. About half of the existing ground floor space would be dedicated to auto sales and display administrative areas, and the rest would be used for storage, along with storage down below in the basement. Some interior shots of the now vacant Sears building. This would undergo just some very minor modifications. For example, the carpeting would come out and some additional paint work inside. But otherwise, no significant changes of note. And then exterior elevation, no changes to the building other than paint and some signage that would be installed. And then this is a architectural rendering of the upgrades to the service center. And no modifications to the building. All the roll-up doors would stay intact, the windows and so forth, just mainly paint and signs. Some key considerations. As Pamela noted, we've got a PD, a plan development amendment to the original ordinance 1087 that's proposed that would allow for auto sales at the site. And it's paired with a plan development permit application, a PDP, that would also recognize the more specific details for the project. And with respect to CEQA environmental review, this is a project exemption, capital extension for reuse of an existing facility where there's no expansion of the use of the buildings and just some minor modifications to the facility. In terms of required approvals, this project was considered by the Planning Commission back at a hearing on June 21st, just a few weeks ago. There were no public comments that were made at the hearing, and by a 5-0 vote, the Commission recommended to Council approval of the project. And then just a note here regarding legal notices that were provided for the hearing tonight. So in terms of the recommended actions, twofold. One would be to a recommendation to first waive the first reading and introduce an ordinance entitled An Ordinance of the City of San Bruno amending Ordinance number 1087, providing for interim automobile sales at the shops Tanfran. This is for APN 014-316-330 and for PD application number 2202. And then secondly, adopting a resolution approving the plan development permit for the use of the former Sears building. I will note that the applicant, Chris Polera, is, I believe, following along here on Zoom and I don't think had any presentation per se, but is available to answer any questions if there are any from the council. So with that, I'd be happy to close the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much to both for the presentation. And at this time, we'll turn colleagues if there's any questions on the presentation at this time. Councilmember Hamilton.
Can I ask a quick question that I know the answer to, but I'm asking for just for the education for the public. When I first heard of this proposal, I was surprised to know that the Sears building could, hold cars in a space that was originally built as a department store. And I asked at that time about the engineering survey and all that, and that it's all been checked out to be able to handle the weight and all of that. So I wanted to have the team confirm that all that's taken place, because I know that that's a question that I had when I first heard about this.
Sure. Through the Mayor. Through the Mayor, Councilmember Hamilton. Yes. So if you were to look at retail, it's retail of clothing or retail of anything else or retail of automobile. So it is much larger, which you mentioned that there's structural analysis and there are other essential studies that we would have to do, but the essence of the building is still retail. So it's worth noting that the developer, the applicant, Chris Polera, has been working closely with building staff to make sure that all of the bells and whistles, if you will be installed in place to ensure safety of that building. Wonderful. And Brian, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, with seeing none at this time, again, as we all know, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to ask at this time if there's members of the public that wish to speak, that they please raise their hands so that it can be called into. After that, we're going to see if there's any additional council comments before I close the public hearing, and then see if there's any action. Lupita, if you could assist.
I will now be bringing in John Franklin. Mr. Franklin?
Yes. Okay. I want to make a public statement. I feel like it's fine to use the Sears Center for automobile use, but I feel like it is actually kind of undervalued as a space. Like the sort of amenities around and in Tanfran Mall have improved substantially. I've lived walking distance from there for a very long time. So I hope that this interim plan doesn't become a long-term plan and we just end up in cars there forever. Ideally, some future plan and development for it would be preferred. That's basically all I have to say. I see that there is a 5-year limit, and given that, I'm not terribly worried, but I would advise the city to come up with a plan to use that space. It's right by public transit. There's a decent chunk of houses that are decently within walking distance. It feels like a good space to put something that might be missing from Tanfran Mall that no one has thought of, even though it somehow has so much. But that's sort of the end of what I have to say about the subject. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Heng Song Ji. Heng Song Ji?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I want to make a statement regarding the thing to do it as an automobile dealer around this area. If we do it, so there will be very heavy traffic around Tanfran Mall. As we see, there are a lot of residential buildings around Tanfran, and so the traffic is already heavy. If we have the dealership here, people will do the test driving, and someone will try to boost and just test the car, and it will impact the surroundings for sure. And also in the area I'm living, so there are a lot some young kids, elementary school kids around here. If the dealership is here, so when cars drive around and people want to try to speed up or try the brake or something, I believe it's not that safe for the young kids. And also there will be the trucks to carry a lot of cars in and out of the dealer. The traffic is something so the city will need to consider and research regarding the environmental impact. The second thing I want to mention is pollution. So if the car dealership sits in a location for a while, for a long time, for example, many years, it may pollute the ground. And so if you want to do the remediation in the future, it's not an easy process. If you want to transfer here back into a retail or back to a restaurant, so it will not be that easy. You will need to do some professional treatment for the area, and it may become a brown land in the future. Another thing I want to mention is the current Tanfran. We have a very good environment. We have the fitness center, we have the theater, we have the restaurants and the retails. And if we put a dealership here, I don't feel it's compatible with our current function or the current commercial. Or also we have a Barnes & Nobles here, which is a bookstore. And put the dealership around the bookstore, I don't feel it is a good fit. And also it also produces noise. And when people sit here to do dinner or something, it may be an impact. Another thing is the city has a plan to do the 1,000 units in Tanfran according to the news released last year. And if you put the dealership here, so the parking will be a big issue. If the city wants to put additional 1,000 units, for example, in Tanfran land, and you want to put the dealership in, so where people going to park? 1,000 units and 1 unit 2 cars, 2,000 cars here, plus the dealership. I believe the Tanfran Mall will become a huge parking lot in the future. Okay, so this is all of my concept, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Stephen. Stephen, I will now bring you in. Stephen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I am wholly in favor of this move. There is a ton of empty parking spaces there now, and the space that Sears used to use for their automotive department once housed lots of cars that would be worked on all the time. So it's a good fit for the location, for the space, especially in the interim. We know that this property will be redeveloped, and it's I believe that this 2 to 5 year lease, means that the mall will be open for the next 5 years. I have a business in Tanfran, and I believe that this business will help support and build up the business I have in Tanfran. So I am completely behind this. I think it'll bring more people to the mall. It's a good use of the space, and I think it'll help the businesses there. And I'm not worried about the parking because half of the parking spaces at Tanfran right now are empty. So I'm behind it. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you for your comments.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring it back to the council for further questions. Obviously, from the council, I know we had some community members, and there may be a little clarity here or there. But any more questions from colleagues? And again, this is from yourselves. It's from the public. Let's get yours out, and then we'll go back to staff. Councilmember Medina.
Yes, thank you. The question I have for staff is the interim status of this proposed allowance of the dealership to be there at Tanfran as the entitlements and the building of potentially the dealership across the street. Is there a connection where I understand it's up to 5 years, but how close are we in scheduling that sale and that entitlement process, just so that we have a better understanding of how long do we think this is really going to be there? Is it 5 years, or as soon as it gets completed, then they're going to move over? If we can get some clarity on that, that would be helpful. And I think clearly from the people that are, a couple of people who commented, maybe they're not up to date, and providing an update on the reimagined Tanfran would be beneficial. So those are the two things that I'm asking staff to provide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City manager or director?
Sure. Through the mayor, thank you, council member Medina. I will take those questions, and I think I can address some of the concerns that were raised by residents. So just to back up as we go forward, it's important for the public to know that the city council did adopt a vision for Tanfran called Reimagining Tanfran. The vision that calls for 1,000 housing units, a mixed-use development with office and retail. In 2021, the property was put up for sale, all through privately owned parcels. There was a parcel that was owned by an Australian pension firm, Sears, as well as JCPenney's sought investors and ended up selling the entire 44-acre site to one entity, Alexandria Real Estate. Alexandria Real Estate has acquired full title to the 3 parcels and is currently in discussions with the city to actually achieve and build the vision that the city council articulated in the Reimagining Tanfran document. And so we are planning a robust master planning process that will have significant community engagement. That process actually will begin in 2022. We have had at the staff level initial discussions with the property owner and developer. They have already placed down a deposit for the city to begin to initiate that master planning project. And the Community and Economic Development Department is fast along the way in hiring consultants so we can have the necessary horsepower and resources on board to publicly announce that master plan and kick that process off. And so this is intended to be a temporary short-term use. The property owner who purchased the property did not purchase the property with the long-term intention to operate a automobile dealership. But they were approached by Cardinelli seeking a temporary use to occupy the facility. Staff does believe that it is that it will be a very successful interim use. Not only will it activate a portion of the mall that is currently desolate now, it will, as I think one public commenter mentioned, likely spur additional traffic into the mall as people are waiting on their cars to be serviced. It will also, because this is linked to the city sale of parcel 7 and 8 and the Crossings development, allow for the automobile dealership to establish themselves in San Bruno, build a customer base for not just sales but service, which will also help accelerate the stabilization process that all new dealerships happen. And so when the new dealership is constructed in the Crossings site, they will have a faster ramp up and stabilization period because they will have had temporary operations in the city of San Bruno. And so that application permit for that temporary facility is being processed. With all development, it is 8 to 12 months for entitlement processing, and then the building is the easy part, but that the developer has instructed us is likely a 12-month process. And so we certainly do envision the property being transacted, entitled and built within the temporary time frame of the 2 to 5 year agreement that's allowed here. With all development, there are potential hiccups and delays, but we are confident that it will be done in the amount of time that is provided for in the documents that are before you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mason.
Thank you. I was just hoping that maybe the city manager can remind us what the estimated revenue was for the Cardinale location.
For the temporary location, we are estimating $500,000 in additional sales tax for the coming 22-23 fiscal year. That is a partial year, and it is a conservative estimate. For the ongoing permanent dealership, the estimate is over $1 million in additional sales tax to the city.
Thank you for highlighting that. And I just wanted to say that I think the faster that we can establish this location in San Bruno, the better for the city. I want to just reassure those who called in that I don't think any of us imagine this as a permanent use. So it is temporary. It's being creative. And from the business owners that I've spoken with at Tanfran, just since Tesla has placed their charging stations in Tanfran, there's been significantly more walking traffic, more purchases made, more people in food court. So I think that this is a positive all-around use of the space temporarily. So thank you to staff for working on this and to Cardinale for exploring this option with us.
Yeah, and I think, City Manager, you did very well. If I believe one of the callers was concerned about youth and that, and I remind that San Bruno Ford once was there with the San Bruno Library as well as Allen Elementary School, which are still located there, and there was a dealership literally within feet of both locations. It is temporary, as was already indicated. It is to begin the process, and then they have to have a permanent home. But it does afford us that opportunity for what the city manager highlighted as far as increases for the community, not only financially, but also to the businesses, as was indicated earlier. So are there any other questions from council members? No motions, just questions. Councilmember Hamilton.
Did we need to make a motion to close the public hearing?
I'm just about to do that, but I'm going down a list here. So right now, before I close completely the public hearing, I'm asking for any final council comments. Okay. Now, with that said, at this point, we are going to close the public hearing. Required that I have a motion, but I am going to ask for a motion in a second and a roll call.
Through the mayor, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton, Councilmember Marty Medina, Hamilton Medina, motion seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason?
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina?
Aye. Thank you all very much. And then we will move on to our second item for public hearing, and that is item B.
8B, conduct second public hearing regarding proposed city charter and commercial real property transfer tax and provide direction to city staff on any amendments to the proposed city charter and the draft ordinance for the commercial real property transfer tax.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was the motion to close the public hearing. Did you make a motion and vote on the action related to the project?
No, you're absolutely correct, and that's why we have the city attorney present. With the council member going me off my script, which I had right here to my left, thank you kindly. So the public hearing was closed, as was very clear, as a 5-0 vote, and now I will ask if a council member can go ahead and move to approve the recommended actions.
Through the mayor, I'll
Yes.
make a motion to introduce, read by title only, and waive further reading of an ordinance amendment for ordinance 1087 that regulates land uses at the shops at Tanfran Mall to allow interim auto sales and inventory storage.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we'll be consensus. Councilmember Hamilton, Marty Medina, motion seconded on the recommended action. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Yes, aye. And thank you very much to our city attorney. And now
Mr. Mayor, one more thing. I think that was just the ordinance and now the resolution too.
Well, we're not doing well here. I was just going off a script, but it's not coinciding. So let's go ahead and do the, let's just follow what the city attorney is saying so we get through this.
Through the mayor, I'll like to make a motion to adopt the resolution approving a plan development permit, PDP, for the use of the former Sears building.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton, a motion and seconded by Marty Medina on the resolution. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. All passed by 5-0, and I believe City Attorney, there is no more action on this item, and we are now safe to proceed to item B, which Lupidia was already kind enough to read to us, so we won't have that redone, and we now will turn it officially over to the city manager.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Medina, City Council members, public at home, Javon Grogan, City Manager. I'm sharing the screen, Ms. Ortiz. I think my internet has been stable enough, knock on wood. I am chiming in from vacation, so we will proceed ahead. This is the second public hearing on the potential city charter and commercial real property transfer tax. The presentation will be presented jointly by myself and Interim City Attorney Tricia Ortiz. Let's advance ahead. Our objective and agenda tonight is to have we'll provide a bit of a background. We will recap the process for establishing a city charter. We will discuss the definition of commercial property, discuss potential tax rates, a timeline, and then have council discussion and action with regard to the draft charter. Let's continue. On October 26, 2021, the City Council had a study session that was related to a larger strategic initiative aimed at the city's fiscal needs, and the city discussed several potential revenue measures for the November 22 ballot. One of those revenue measures was the establishment of a city charter and a commercial property transfer tax as a combined measure. And so staff from that direction sought out to analyze that. And so we've had public engagement around the potential city charter and commercial property transfer tax. We will have had 5 public meetings between March and August. This is our 4th public meeting between March or since March on this topic. We have, based on City Council direction to increase public outreach, produced a citywide information mailer that was mailed to every mailing address, business and residents within the city of San Bruno. The city also created a website to convey information about the proposed charter and transfer tax, staff reports, presentations, and Zoom links for all of these meetings. And that website is our normal address, www.sanbruno.ca.gov/city or charter city. And at our last meeting, I believe Councilmember Salazar proffered some changes to that, and we've updated that website. Social media posts, as well as a city manager's newsletter round out our public engagement. Just a little bit of background, the city's fiscal sustainability. So And for the city council, I know we've had 4 meetings on this, so some of this is a bit of a recap, but one of the things we want to do is we know that new people are joining the conversation, and so we want to provide a little bit of a recap. So in 2019, the city launched a comprehensive fiscal sustainability project. That project had multiple components, but the core goal was to address the city's fiscal conditions so that there are sufficient annual and long-term funds to provide high-quality services as well as repair and replace our needed infrastructure. The project remains active. The city has already implemented numerous expenditure controls, revenue enhancements, and cost shifts. Within the body of the staff report, a number of them are mentioned. Budgetary and personnel cost containment reductions. As the council knows, we reduced significant positions, all of which have not been yet restored. We froze vacant positions. The city also placed Measure GA half-cent sales tax on the ballot, as well as the hotel room tax. The city council adopted robust development impact fees. We have pursued significant economic development opportunities with both YouTube, the Bay Hill Specific Plan, and the Reimagining Tanfran process. We have sought out and received various grants, one for our stormwater system, a little bit over $1 million for the Spyglass stormwater system, a portion of our stormwater system that we know is significantly underfunded and have not been able to pass a dedicated resource for, but we did receive $1 million for one project from the federal government where we were sandbagging homes each winter. We received a Measure K grant thanks to City Council advocacy for Posey Plaza. We recently had the Giants Community Foundation renovate Greenberg Field, as various other fire assistance grants and capital projects for a regional stormwater capture project at I-80, I-280, and I-380, and a number of other items. But what we know is despite all the successful efforts that have been undertaken through the comprehensive fiscal sustainability project, there remain significant challenges for San Bruno. It's also worth noting that a number of actions that you took, even in tonight's meetings, are successful efforts under that project. The Artichoke agreement that you adopted earlier today is just one example. This is true with respect to both our ongoing financial need for city programs and services, as well as the money needed to maintain and replace infrastructure. And so we've seen this slide a lot in your action with regard to the Artichoke project, as well as the very last item, which once completely installed will provide additional sales tax revenue to the general fund, will help this chart. But what this chart shows is that San Bruno has a revenue problem, not an expenditure problem. Our per capita revenue for our peer cities in the county is the second lowest, and it's second only to Daly City, and that's a city with more than twice the population of San Bruno, so that skews their per capita number. But suffice to say, we are amongst the lowest per capita revenue generators, and that's largely due to economic development and our tax base. And so there's no silver bullet solution. You do not change this on a dime or turn a cruise ship on a dime, as is often said, and there's very much a multi-pronged process. Also worth noting that when we talk about our need for infrastructure, this is just one way to articulate that need, and we've had study sessions where we've talked about this robustly. But for the public that are just joining the conversation, it's worth noting that in 2019, when the City Council implemented a robust set of development impact fees, there was an analysis done of the infrastructure needs that San Bruno needs to expand over the next 20 years. And what was clear about that is legally, development has to pay their full share, but development cannot bear the full cost of the city's infrastructure needs. And so the table that's on the screen here was taken from a February 2019 report. And what it shows that the city's total infrastructure need in various categories, whether it's public facilities, general government, transportation, over the next 20 years is $457 million. New development through development impact fees can be a significant amount, $147 million. But a larger percent, actually 68% of $310 million, needs to come from another funding source. Development, new development through impact fees by law has to pay their full share with development impact fees, but they cannot be charged the full burden of the city's infrastructure. And so we need to undertake additional revenue sources for these known infrastructure improvements. And so those are the costs there. And so that really brings us to the discussion of a charter city. And when the city council discussed a charter city, it was really to look at imposing a real property transfer tax. It's worth noting, and the city attorney will talk about this shortly, that in the state of California, there are two types of cities. There are general law cities and there are charter cities. General law generally means that you follow the laws outlined by the state of California. Charter cities, you can sort of chart your own destiny to some extent within state law and provide provisions within a charter that is locally adopted by voters. And there are some differences that we'll talk about with regard to regulation of municipal affairs. The city council can draft a charter. Drafting of that charter requires 2 public hearings and a vote of the people at a statewide general election and a majority vote to adopt. What that means is that state law requires that the city has 2 public hearings on the contents of the draft charter, and tonight is our second public hearing on the contents of that draft charter. That draft charter, if supported by 4 of 5 council members, would be placed on a statewide general election, the next one being November 22, and then a majority of the voting public would be needed to adopt that charter and any provisions there within. On March 29th, 2022, the City Council met and directed staff to develop a simple charter, meaning a charter that really at its core had an integrated commercial real property transfer tax. And just talking a little bit about the commercial property transfer tax, it is important to note that that tax is paid upon the sale of commercial property, not upon establishment of the tax, but only when the property transacts. And the amount, the payment of that tax, who pays what portion or all, is negotiated in that transaction between the buyer and the seller. The definition that we used for commercial property transfer tax, the commercial property, which is typically thought of as commercial property, an office building, hotel, but in fact, commercial property includes warehouses, manufacturing buildings, residential. Commercial residential is a whole line of residential products. And so we allocated that to 5 units or greater in the analysis, and planned unit developments and vacant land. Important to note, by commercial property transfer tax, it would not be paid by any single family residence, condo, or property that is 4 units or less. So staff is recommending a 1% tax rate. Again, the structure would only apply to residential properties of 5 plexes and more, and then all other commercial property transferred, all other commercial properties upon sale. We estimate the annual revenue at $1.1 million annually. We talked about this in detail before, but the city conducted a simulation analysis looking at actual transacted commercial property sales by the definition that we've discussed over the last 5 years and took the average. And so while this is a revenue source that will fluctuate with the economy and actual property sales, on average, had this tax been in place over the last 5 years, the city would have recovered $1.1 million annually. And so now I'll turn it over to our interim city attorney, Tricia Ortiz, to talk a little bit more about exercising charter city powers and municipal affairs.
All right, thank you, Jovan. And so these slides will look familiar. I'm going to briefly recap what it means to be a charter city. So a charter city has the power to regulate all municipal affairs subject to limitations, and those limitations are what the limits on the city's powers that are prescribed in the city's charter that it adopts, any limitations in the California Constitution, and any limitations in the United States Constitution. An example of a charter that limits the city, a charter provision limiting the city's power would be the current draft charter provision, which says that the city must pay prevailing wages, even though the payment of prevailing wages is a municipal affair. And then an example of the state constitution limiting the city's power are the voter initiatives that are codified in the Constitution that are Propositions 13, 28, and 26, which strictly limit cities' revenue-raising powers. And so even if the city becomes a charter city and has greater powers to tax, it's still constrained by the powers that are the limitations in the Constitution, meaning that any tax requires voter approval, and and the city could not change tax rates, increase them without going back to the voters. So then what things are municipal affairs was a question that was raised, and it's difficult to provide a full, complete list of what a municipal affair is that a city can regulate, because it's determined on a case-by-case basis. But there are a few examples of well settled to be municipal affairs, and that is public contracting, prevailing wages, the process for issuing bonds, and the process for adopting assessments. But again, assessments have been largely constrained by Prop 218. So even though a charter city would have the ability to maybe provide its own assessment process, it would still be constrained by the requirements in Prop 218, which requires a majority protest proceeding and strict limits on the amount of an assessment. And I think on the next slide, we're going to see a list of areas where it's well settled that these are not municipal affairs. These are areas of statewide concern, and a charter city does not have the power to regulate in any of these areas, and that's things such as the Brown Act and the Public Records Act and annexations. And then on the final slide, the prior City Council meetings on the charter, there was some discussion and possibly concern about the amount of power the city might have in becoming a charter city. So in response to that concern, we have drafted an alternative charter for the City Council's consideration, which is intended to say that that if the city becomes a charter city, the charter would limit all of the city's powers to only the powers that it could exercise as a general law city, with the exception of the ability to impose a real estate or real property transfer tax.
Okay. And so timeline, as mentioned before, we had the meeting on March 29th, but our public hearings for the draft charter started on June 7th. We had a study session on June 28th. We are here this evening for the second public hearing. Important note on state law, 21 days must elapse between the second public hearing and the City Council's decision to place the item on the ballot. That's an important note because what we're asking for tonight is council direction on the contents of the draft charter. That is a simple majority. However, on August 3rd, when the City Council will have the decision before it to place the item on the ballot, that requires 4 or 5 council members to vote in affirmative to place the item on the ballot. And so that meeting is scheduled for a special meeting on August 3rd. And as we discussed before, the countywide deadline, or I guess statewide deadline, for submitting items on the November 20 ballot to our county election office is August 12th. And so your action on August 3rd, should 4 or 5 council members support, we will have sufficient time to submit all the required paperwork to the county. And so tonight we will proceed as normal with council questions on the presentation, public comment, and then City Council direction on the proposed charter. to the San Bruno voters. But again, the actual vote to place that on the ballot will not happen until August 3rd. This is simply providing direction to staff on what to bring before you on August 3rd. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you both for your presentations. Are there questions at this time from colleagues in regards to the presentation? Seeing none at this time, we'll go ahead and move it to see if we have any members of the public that wish to speak or have any comments on this topic, please. Thank you, Council.
The first speaker is Stephen. Stephen, I will let you in. Stephen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say I'm glad that we're talking about this, and I have to admit that this is I missed the prior meeting, so I'm glad that I'm seeing this one. And the fact that this, in terms of the charter city, is we're only talking about the real estate tax for commercial properties and residential properties 5 units and above, means that that the general public is there'll be no impact to the general public, other than the fact that the city would see, based on the city manager's presentation, $1 or more million a year to the general fund. And as long as I've been watching politics in San Bruno, I've never been to a meeting, or been to very few meetings where we didn't talk about how we were underfunded. In fact, that topic has presented itself multiple times this evening. I think it makes total sense. I'm not sure why any of the council members would not send this to the public for a vote. It makes sense to let the residents of San Bruno weigh in, and that's the true democratic process here. So I'm really interested in seeing how the council members and the mayor view tonight's presentation and what the next steps are. But this is something that seems very important to the city in terms of revenue, and I think the public should be the ones who are allowed to weigh in this November. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Trust Real Estate / Trust Properties. I will now bring you in. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, this is Tina, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. For transfer, we small property business. Historically, the property transfer tax has always hurt small property small businesses. Because you're never really taxing on the person who is paying for the tax. It's really the end user is being hurt. Especially for you're talking about the 5 units and up for transfer tax. Where do you think that the landlord's going to transfer the tax on? They're not going to pay it themselves. Is the tenant's going to be end up paying for it? In San Bruno, I do property management. A lot of middle class tenants that we have in the city of San Bruno, they will be the one that getting hurt. And I'm a small business owner. I know there's only a few big landlords in the city of San Bruno. They're not the one that's paying for it. We know Dennis Summit is not paying for it. Welch is not paying for it. It's really the small business owners are paying for it. So then, not now. Seriously, because we just went through COVID. Small business is still trying to pick up the business. It's really hurting everybody right now. And knowing all the interest rate has gone up so much, and it's just going to be hurting everybody in the general public, not the one that you're taxing who is actually paying for the tax, the transfer tax. It's really the end user, like the people that paying for doing grocery. They are the one that paying for all these taxes. So please oppose to this commercial transfer tax. You're not taxing the big guy. You're taxing the small people, the tenant, and small businesses. So please reconsider before you even get onto the November ballot. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
I will now be bringing in Joe Yankee. Joe Yankee, can you hear us?
Hi, this is Joe Yank. I just have a simple question. Will the transfer tax apply to condominiums? Do you hear me?
Yes, we heard you. Are you finished, Mr. Yankee?
Yes, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker I will be bringing in is John Franklin. John Franklin, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, whenever you're
Okay.
ready.
Sure. I personally think this tax is a good thing as a landlord in San Bruno. I don't think every landlord is going to be operating like 5 units or higher. And if landlords are busy passing every possible income against every possible like cost to their tenants, then that is a demonstration that landlords aren't really capable of caring for other people. I would say that we should have this going forward. And that's all. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
There are no other speakers.
Thank you very much. Okay, with there being no other speakers, and this is a public hearing, wanted to go ahead and see if there were any, well, let's just go ahead and close the public hearing to make that, I'll go back in my cycle here. Let's have a motion and second to close public hearing, and then we'll bring it back to council for further questions, comments, etc.
Through the chair, I'll make the motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion seconded, Salazar Hamilton to close public hearing. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton,
Aye.
Councilmember Marty Medina,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Mason,
Aye.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Back to council for any other clarifying questions, comments, etc. Councilmember Hamilton.
I think it's important that we address Mr. Yankee's question about condominium sales. So my understanding, and staff please correct me, is that the sale of a single condominium would not be affected by this tax. If you happen to own a building that had 5 or more condominiums in it, you were selling the entirety of the building, that would be subject to the transfer tax. That is my understanding. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm mistaken.
Thank you. City Manager?
That is correct. Condominiums, individual condominium sales would not be subject to the tax.
Thank you.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, I just wanted to share that I did receive one email from a real estate professional that is in opposition to this. I have spoken to a number of residents that are in favor of it. It goes along with this council's attempt to generate revenue that impacts the least amount of residents that live in our community while improving the services to our community. So I think we are doing as much as we can, and I look forward to this vote. There is no silver bullet. There is no gold mine hidden in City Hall that we're ever going to solve the problem of increasing our revenues, but it takes many different sources, and that's why I'm in support of this. So, thank you.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank the the staff for addressing some of Councilmember Salazar's comments from the last meeting. And I just think that this is really another opportunity to bring this item to the public. Three of us ran campaigns around the charter and commercial tax, promising that single residential homes would not be affected, and we're following through with those promises. And our other two council members didn't run on the topic. So this is really an opportunity for all of us to unify behind something that is going to bring additional revenue to the city. And knowing that three council members were elected very openly supporting this, I think says a lot. So thank you so much.
Councilor Hamilton? You're on mute.
Darn it, sorry about that.
All right.
So I just want to echo my colleagues' statements. I mean, there's no secret that I'm in favor of this move. I think it's important that I think we've made some important changes along the way during the discussion, especially around limitation of powers in the charter, because the definition of what is a municipal affair is done on a case-by-case basis, as we heard from our city attorney. I think it was important that we make sure that there's no hidden powers that would be granted to the city council by becoming charter city, and that we're adopting, and that it's very clear to everyone that we are adopting this charter for the sole purpose of enacting the real estate property transfer tax. So I appreciate the work that's been done to add that additional language to the charter regarding limitation of powers. It's really important to everyone listening, if this is a new topic, that the way that the charter works is that any amendment of any kind to the charter would need to go back to the voters. So for those who are concerned that, okay, the transfer tax is for commercial properties of 5 units or more, that if in the future somebody wanted to extend that and to additional properties, that would have to go specifically to the voters, and it would go through the same process that we're going through right now of having public hearings to amend the charter, get it on the ballot with a vote for council members, and then have a majority of the voters pass it. So this is not a means of granting extra powers to this or future city councils or to the city of San Bruno. It is exactly what it is. So I look forward to the further discussion during the special meeting in August, and very much thank staff for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar.
I'd like to start with a question in the revised language of the second proposed charter. And in Article 3, Section 301, it outlines the power that the council would have to implement the transfer tax. And I don't see any details in there on how that transfer tax would be implemented. And rather, all of that is included in the accompanying ordinance. And so I wanted to get clarification on how much latitude there is there in Section 301 for the council to interpret its power to implement that tax.
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to answer the question?
Thank you very much. City Attorney.
Okay. Mayor Medina and Councilmember Salazar, as part of the measure, there will be the charter that gives the city the power to adopt a real estate transfer tax, but then the voters will also be approving a tax ordinance, which lays out all of the details about the levy and the collection of the tax. That ordinance is going to be an ordinance adopted by the voters, and it can't be amended or changed except by the voters. So the charter just gives the power to do the tax. The tax is actually adopted and implemented through the ordinance, but both of those documents are approved by the voters and cannot be changed unless they go back to the voters.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I was wondering about that because typically we do ordinances at our level and those aren't typically put out to the voters. So wanted clarification on that. Thank you. So you know, I have to say that initially I was attracted to the idea of the transfer tax because it, you know, free money, why not? You know, and you want to look for revenue where you can. Yeah, we had two examples today in other actions that we took where our collaboration with businesses that wanted to operate in the city resulted in a positive outcome where we didn't impose a tax on them as was initially proposed. We actually worked on a solution that was mutually agreeable with businesses. I think that that atmosphere where the city can work with businesses to achieve common goals and guarantee, you know, longevity of businesses in the city is a much better approach than an approach that just tax them where you can. I don't doubt that this could easily be passed if it was put on a ballot, but everything I've seen so far is give us a charter so we can get more money. And if that's the message that we're going to be sending out, then I don't think that it's necessarily being completely transparent on you know what's being put out there. And you know, looking at the numbers that have been discussed over and over again, you know, this number of $1 million ongoing revenue. And you know, I think about the disclosures you get when you make an investment, right? Past performance is not an indicator of future performance. And you know, if we look at the past 5 years, yes, if you average that out, it'd be about $1 million a year in revenue. But if you take out 2019, which was by all, I think everyone would agree that that was an anomaly. You're looking at closer to less than half. And so the amount of effort that we've already gone through and just the amount of effort that would be involved in collecting this money, which now falls on the city, not on the county like we do with other taxes, I don't see that it's necessarily worth effort of going through this, putting it on a ballot. Of course, the taxpayers won't get the full story about, you know, what's going to be involved in trying to identify these properties and collect on them on a go-forward basis. This is probably not the easiest way to do it. And in the end, if this is our one big push for the year, I would have liked it to be something that would be a lot more significant in addressing the shortfalls that have been discussed, you know, for as long as I can remember. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Councilmember Hamilton?
I don't see this as being our one big push for the year. I think we've made a whole bunch of different moves to raise revenue, including several tonight. And I completely agree with you, Councilmember Salazar, when you say that it is a good approach, and we had an example of it tonight of partnering with businesses to find creative ways of raising revenue. We did that tonight, and that is absolutely one of the tools in our arsenal. But it isn't our only tool in our arsenal. And you say that we're throwing this out there specifically for the purpose of raising money. Yeah, that's exactly what it's for. We've been very transparent about it, and that's been the entire point all the way through. That the point of becoming a charter city is so that we can pass a real property transfer tax and align that tax in a way so that it does not impact the overwhelming majority of the people of San Bruno. And you made the statement that you know, if we put this on the ballot, it'll probably easily pass. Think about that. Think about what that statement means. What you're saying is that a majority of voters would support this. So weren't all 5 of us elected to represent the voters of San Bruno? And if you feel that this is something that they would approve, isn't it our duty to put it on the ballot to let them do it? Those are my.
I'd say that it's our duty to educate our constituents and let them know the impact of potential votes and not make decisions that would, on the surface, be advantageous, but potentially not be as advantageous as is being proposed. And I don't think that the arguments that are being put out there are balanced. And that's been the case before. I didn't I didn't support the height limit measures when those came out, again, for the same reason that I felt that it would erode the public's ability to make individual decisions on developments. But the lure of making things shinier and newer and generating revenue was overwhelming in that case, and there was no opposition to it, and so the city's arguments were the only arguments, and those things passed. And now I think we're seeing at least segments of the community that are regretting passing that and not realizing what they were actually voting for at the time.
Well, I certainly don't want to repeat that process. I wasn't here when that passed, but everything that we've done here today, as outlined in the presentation and in the previous meetings here, this particular proposed move to a charter city and the accompanying ordinance, all that, it's all out in the open. It's all open and transparent. This isn't a bait and switch. This isn't the voters not understanding what they're getting what they're getting with their yes vote. It's been pretty transparent. And echoing a comment that Councilmember Medina said earlier, I've been reached out to by several people on this, and lots of votes of support and a few folks reaching out in opposition. Every single person without exception who has opposed it has been a commercial realtor. So that tells me something as well in terms of who we're trying to benefit and ultimately my support for this stems from the slides that we all saw earlier, that we have $310 million in unfunded capital needs and ongoing needs. And is this tax going to fund all of that? Of course not. But we have to chip away at it, and that's why I support this. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, I just want to say that we are just agreeing, or not agreeing, hopefully agreeing to place this on the ballot, and it's not being done tonight. So, but I would just say that, the decision, some of us might support it more than others, but I think that ultimately the goal is really to allow the public to make that decision. And I've talked to a lot of business owners, especially in our downtown, who really support it because, once again, it's more revenue. I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons we all give for things not being accomplished is because we don't have the money. And so this is an opportunity. Again, it's not impacting small businesses. It's not impacted as individual residential properties up to 4 units. And I think that I want to just mention that I think there was conversation, if I remember correctly, around whether this is going to be more than just a tax. And the conversation that the council had was, we want to get it on the ballot this year, but it really can be a more robust conversation. There was even someone who mentioned creating like a charter committee to talk about what the committee can do later on. But because of the goal to get this on the ballot, the focus really is around the commercial transfer tax. So I think just going to Councilor Salazar's point, it doesn't mean that you can't do more with it or less with it in the future. It just means that right now the goal is to utilize the charter as a vehicle to ensure that we start getting more revenue. So thank you.
Yeah, and for me, I think that was some of the, you can always put something on the ballot and say, we're going to tax X. We're going to ask for Y. And sometimes we don't want to do it because of the threshold, right? And that's why, whether it's a bond or whether it's this. Well, in order to offer this tax, you have to have a charter city, okay? And that is, in essence, we're changing general law to a charter to tax. That's the reality. And that was concurred tonight. When it comes to housing units, I still question that. There's more to it. I have to ask the city attorney because I started writing down some notes and I may have heard it incorrectly. A statement was starting to be made about an assessment process, but there's still the Proposition 218, which you have to require a majority in which to proceed or not proceed. And when I think 218, for some reason, maybe that's where I concentration was like when we do the water sewer rates, right? We put it out, it's 218, you got to get a majority that says, do not do this, and you don't. So are we talking the same similarity?
So, Mr. Mayor, when Prop 218 applies to taxes, fees, and assessments are benefit assessments. It's like a fee. It has a very similar process where you hold a public hearing, and the notice for that hearing includes an assessment ballot, and you cannot move forward to approve the assessment unless the ballots in opposition do not exceed the ballots in support. So my point was, a charter city has the ability as a municipal affair to set its own process instead of using the Landscaping and Lighting District Act of 1972. It could set its own ordinance on the process for adopting an assessment. However, it would still be constrained by the limitations in the Constitution, which says you have to have a notice public hearing. That hearing has to have a majority protest process that includes the assessment ballot that I just described.
Okay, and I thank you. And just so I'm clear, and maybe I'm not 100%, it doesn't change the process. So a city council could not come up with an assessment process and say, we want to offer this assessment, this tax, and just say, okay, if we go out there and we go to 218, we don't get a majority that says no, we can go forward with that, or does that have to go out to the vote of the people? If I'm clear. Maybe I'm not.
So the city could not adopt an assessment without complying with the limitations in the Constitution in Prop 218, which requires a hearing and assessment balloting. So it could not just go out and adopt an assessment without having the property owners have their ability to provide a majority protest as offered under the Constitution in 218.
I understand that, but what I'm asking is, we're a charter city tomorrow. A majority of the council says we want to do an assessment. We bring it forward, we follow Prop 218. Can the city council then therefore pass if there's not a majority that say no?
Yes, but you could do that today. You could go through the assessment process today and impose an assessment. There would be no change in that. The municipal affair part of it is, there's a whole process in the 1972 Act for how you would impose a landscaping and lighting district tax. You know, like notice provisions and how many hearings and things like that. You could adopt your own, the City of San Bruno Landscaping and Lighting District Act, and it would be the process for adopting that assessment. But you would still have to, in establishing that process, comply with Prop 218.
Okay. All right. Thank you for indulging and going through it a couple of times. Yeah, and I think, as far as becoming a general law, I think, a commission is the right avenue, because you're looking at it holistically. You're looking at it globally. You're getting community engagement, community involvement. This is wanting to change the form of the government in some respects in order to bring forward a tax, bottom line. Because we're saying everything else is good for now, and then we can deal with all that later. And I think that also is a big change. So also on the housing element, I know commercial is considered by law, I guess, 5 units or more. But I know when I speak to people too, commercial is that's not their vision of what commercial is. So anyway, again, the words matter to me, and what things are get modified within a charter versus a general law do matter, and that's what I'm still looking at, and actually talking to some of our neighboring communities, and that has been extremely helpful too. So that's it for me at this moment. I'm sorry. If that's it for my colleagues, we're gonna go to, of course, council comments, but however, we're going to adjourn in somebody's memory, and so I just want to give a heads up to that as for council, and then we are going to go back into closed session just as an FYI. City manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A few things. But before we close this out, I think we need direction from the City Council, if there's a desire to have direction, on the version of the charter that we should place before the council on August 3rd. And so as a part of the packet, you have the initial proposed charter as well as a alternative charter that limits the City Council's power, should that charter be adopted, to only the powers of a general law city, but for the ability to implement the real estate property transfer tax. And so there are two charters attached to the staff report. Again, the alternative one was based on council conversations on June 7th and June 28th. And I think if we need direction on that. The other thing is, Councilmember Salazar mentioned one thing that I just want to clarify is actually the implementation of this, of the commercial property transfer tax. If it goes on the ballot and if it is adopted, it will actually be the county that collects the tax. They do charge an administration fee for that, as well as they do other taxes, but it would be the county that collects the tax and remits it back to the city. And then an overarching statement as we engage in this conversation, I just want to commend the entire City Council. I know that this is a important but sometimes difficult and complex discussion, and there's not always 100% agreement. But listening to the conversation, I actually truly believe that given the magnitude of the financial challenge facing the city of San Bruno, it's great that we're having a conversation, and that's the first start. And so I just want to commend the council for engaging in the conversation, knowing that it is an important and difficult one.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilmember Hamilton?
So to the city manager's question for direction, I think that I am supportive of the alternate version of the charter that specifically has the clause for limitation on powers. I think that's important. I think that goes to the concern that was brought up initially by Councilmember Salazar and then reiterated by the mayor just a few moments ago, regarding the concept of changing our form of government. By having this limitation of powers, we are not changing our form of government. We are specifically saying we have all the powers of a general law city, which is what we have today, plus whatever we provide in this charter, which happens to be the transfer tax. So as far as any other changes to our form of government, there are none. And this very clearly in black and white lays that out, and that if in the future there was any desire to amend the charter through a charter committee or whatever other process we would want to do, as we've clearly articulated, that entire process would be done the same way this process is being done, with public hearings and then ultimately a vote of the people. So it was a long way of saying I support the alternate charter with the limitations of power.
Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, I think it was healthy that we made it really clear, and staff responded by giving us a revised charter that is limiting in the powers, that allows us to increase the revenues for our city. So I'm support of the revised charter. Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar.
I just wanted a clarification based on the city manager's last comments, because in the report we have, it says that the tax will be implemented by the tax administrator, which is defined as being the finance director in this document. So that's why my interpretation was that the city would be responsible for it. So can I get clarification then on what the county's role would be versus the finance directors?
City Manager?
Sure. City Attorney, do you want to opine, or how do you do it?
You can go ahead, and I'll chime in if there's anything to fill in.
Yeah. No, the tax administrator is the finance director, but payment can be done through the county, and the county charges an administration fee for that. consistent with how other cities implement the payment of the tax.
City Manager Grogan, or through the mayor?
Yes, please, Marty. Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, would it be the same that the county collects the stormwater tax?
Well, that's different because
but it's on my bill, right? And I send the bill to the county, and the county then sends the funds to the city.
Right. Well, that's different because that is a assessment where the city sends the county what to put on the annual property tax roll.
Okay.
For example, when you sell a property, it's typically the title company goes to the county recorder's office to record that transaction and pay all taxes due, and then the county distributes the tax money to the various entities. And so that would happen the same way with a commercial property transfer taxes. My experience and how it works in other cities, other charter cities that have the tax.
Councilmember Salazar, or any further?
No, I guess that sort of explains it. So I guess the responsibility is on the finance director. However, the finance director can outsource the responsibility to the county for a fee, is what we're saying. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because I did see some language where there might be assessments, penalties. I guess somebody can come forward and say something can be determined, and it mentions the tax administrator, which is the finance director. So when it comes to delinquencies and all that, does the city have any engagement in that?
City Attorney, will you take that?
Sure. So, Mr. Mayor, there is a whole section on how the penalties are assessed, how the city manages delinquent payments, and the tax administrator is the office or the role person who will administer all of those duties. If you're looking at the draft ordinance, section 3.40.140 provides a process where the tax administrator would file a notice of delinquencies and provide notice to those who have not paid the tax.
Okay, so there is some things that we are doing at City Hall, and there's some things that are with the county and city manager. So. Okay. Any other feedback to the city manager?
So we'll take that to the mayor as a majority of the city council supporting bringing forward the alternative charter on August 3rd. Is that correct?
It's August 3rd. You're correct on that, and I think you're correct on your assessment. I still have concerns, which I've addressed, but you absolutely have a majority. And please, I stand corrected, and I know my colleagues are not shy to let me know if I am incorrect. Okay. With that said, can we move on to council comments? As I mentioned, we are going to adjourn in the memory of Ruth Waters at the end. And so at this time, I'd like to call on Councilmember Medina.
Found that mute button. There it was, right up there on top. Just a bunch of thank yous, really. And a lot of it involves our downtown. First, I wanted to thank the community members for volunteering to help with the community cleanup this past weekend. Particularly, thank you, Riley Gibbons, for organizing this relaunched monthly event. I think they reported at least 300 plus pounds of debris and litter and weeds. So that was great.
And spent fireworks.
I didn't see too many actually, but I heard a lot of them. Wanted to thank staff for moving forward with providing the notices on the newspaper racks that have been kind of deteriorating and rusting away. So that's great that they'll will potentially be removed. I want to report out a little bit on the Downtown Improvement Committee, where earlier last week Councilman Hamilton and I met with staff and the landscape architect regarding the revised design concepts for Centennial Plaza. I look forward to my colleagues and our community's reaction and hopefully appreciation of the latest designs. It's really going to be incredible. So thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank you in advance for adjourning the meeting in memory of Ruth Waters. I was privileged to attend her memorial this weekend along with Vice Mayor Mason. The Vice Mayor spoke very eloquently about Ruth and her experiences, and I want to thank you, Linda, for your kind words at that event. And there was just a really wonderful event hosted by Stephen Seymour and Sandra Perez Vargas and a whole bunch of community members who pitched in for just a really wonderful and touching event in her memory. So anyway, thank you again for adjourning tonight in Ruth's memory.
And it's also thanks to the Vice Mayor as well. Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a couple of just some comments and updates. The first one is just if we could have an update, I think all the council via email or otherwise, but that was an interesting comment by Ms. Yankee at the beginning of the meeting regarding the senior center. So if we could just have an update on what is going on, because the food program has gone through different iterations as we reopened for COVID, and that would be great. Just a reminder to everybody with COVID again on the rise, that we do have Bay PLS that's located on San Bruno Avenue. It is still open and it's administering free COVID tests again. There was a little period of time where they weren't necessarily free. They are free again and it's 7 days a week. I want to just thank the city again and Impact Justice. For those of you who may not have been watching the earlier special meeting, they did complete the second part of the San Bruno Police Department internal and external review. So prior to the 7 o'clock meeting, we met at 5 o'clock to hear a presentation and accept the report. And like all other department plans that we review and invest in, I do look forward to hearing how we will review and tailor recommendations to San Bruno in the future. The next announcement is just really kind of a commendation. I wanted to just commend the San Bruno Explorers. They received first place overall in the San Mateo County Law Enforcement Explorer Challenge. I wanted to take a moment to congratulate Zidane and Rania Millie. They actually won first place for the physical obstacle course in San Mateo County. So kudos to them. And these two I'll call them youngsters compared to myself, but they've really been pillars of the Explorer program here in San Bruno, and they continue to inspire the next generation, which is difficult to say because they themselves are so young. But they are inspiring the next generation to get involved in civic life, and I just wanted to thank them for their services for San Bruno. And if it's okay with the mayor, I just have a couple of words about Ruth Waters that I've learned actually in the last couple of weeks, and maybe it'll kind of complement the closing. Would that be okay, Mayor Medina?
I would appreciate that. I know I conveyed that I was unavailable on Saturday and Sunday, Monday of this week, so I wasn't able to attend. But yes, and with your presence there, I think that you might bring some very nice comments. So yes, when we're prepared, I will ask for your assistance if I could.
Thank you. No, thank you. My pleasure. So Councilmember Hamilton had shared the death of Ruth Waters in our last council meeting. And since then, a significant amount of the community that she served, led, and will really continue her legacy has arisen to speak of her influence on their lives. This past weekend, over 100 people gathered to remember her here in San Bruno. We thank and commend Ruth Waters for being open to the Peninsula Museum of Art, moving their large location in Burlingame to San Bruno. Then pivotal in the opening of the Open Studios for artists also known as AZ Gallery in Tanfran, and then AZ Gallery 2 in Tanfran, along with community member Stephen Seymour. Together, they then founded the Peninsula Art Museum with the goal of bringing art to the peninsula. It's important to note that Ruth believed strongly in supporting fellow women in their endeavors, and particularly in the art world. She also wanted to ensure that socioeconomics did not interfere with anyone's ability to be artists and hone their craft. Silicon Valley Open Studios is amongst one of the most popular and visited art events in the peninsula, bringing people from all over the Bay Area and beyond, introducing them to cities, artists, and studios. Because of Ruth and Stephen Seymour's collaboration, this was the first year in their history, according to Ruth, that we had a location here in San Bruno, and in fact in the northern peninsula. It's the first time San Bruno was even on the schedule. And to her recollection, as I mentioned a moment ago, the first time the Northern Peninsula had been represented. On July 1st, 2022, the San Mateo Daily Journal wrote an entire spread on Ruth Waters, naming her a quote-unquote community builder who uplifted other artists and connected their work to the public. Here are just some excerpts of that article. So Ruth Waters attended Stanford University, where she received a degree in literature and began sculpting 65 years ago. Her pieces would go on to be exhibited across the country and overseas in Seattle, Michigan, Washington, D.C., New York, China, and Ireland. And she and her work were also honored by a number of local leaders, including as Woman of the Year by U.S. Representative Jackie Speer and former State Senator Jerry Hill. She's behind spaces like Belmont's Twin Pines Art Center, the Peninsula Museum of Art, and her most recent adventure, the Peninsula Art Foundation in Tanfran Mall. Outside of her art, Ruth Waters had many other successes. She was a long-time long-distance runner who finished 16 marathons and an avid tennis player who was a national tennis champion and a journalist. Beyond connecting through art, though, Ruth wanted to connect people in life. She spent the last 45 years of hers working to build spaces where artists can share their work with the community while also teaching her skills to future generations of artists. Lastly, Ruth Waters met her husband, Phil Waters, in high school. Both attended Stanford University and had been married almost 68 years at the time of her death. Waters is survived by her husband, 3 children, and 3 grandchildren. Thank you, Ruth Waters, for your contributions to all of us and for your great efforts and accomplishment in bringing an art footprint in San Bruno. May you rest in peace and may your legacy live on. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'll check with, I have something before we will end, and I don't think I need to add to that, Vice Mayor. Thank you. Are there any other comments from colleagues under council comments? Real quick, I did want to just report that I had some nice things as far as meeting with the General Counsel of Mexico, via Zoom, of course, and now in our world today. But to meet with her and talk about ways to collaborate and reach out to the community and what the council can offer to our community. Also spoke at the Summer Big Lift Bel Air Zoom Assembly, and that was interesting and always exciting to hear, to have my few minutes to talk, but then the young people were asking me questions, and I will tell you, from the recreation center pool that's being built, to how do you run for mayor, to it could just be about what were my favorites. So anyway, it was very interesting. I appreciate that the principal offered that. Also on the Sam Trans that I sit on the board of directors, that we took the action, we had a pilot program for youth passes as a temporary to see about how it operated, how it worked. And that was to take care of those who are already in programs that need subsidies. And the action of the board of directors was to make this a permanent fixture now for Sam Trans, provide that service to the youth. And so I want to encourage that. Also, with the equity program for the JPA 101 Managed Lane that I am now the chair of, we are reaching out, and I want to see San Bruno reach out for either a Clipper card or the Fast Track device for those that need that, because it's for everyone, and so there are some opportunities out there, and so there are different groups, and I can maybe ask the city to assist in maybe getting that information out. And also at Skyline College, the median strip, I was up there taking a walk and around and spoke to a couple neighbors, and it has come a long way, and the community is happy. And what's best about that, of course, is it was a community effort physically, it was a community effort emotionally, and it was a community effort financially by that neighborhood up there, in addition to the council passing $30,000 for that project, in addition to Skyline College passing money for that project, and staff working with all those entities. So thank you to all, and to those that are behind the scenes. So with that, if there is nothing else from my colleague, keep in mind we are going to reconvene the closed session. You've all been sent a link. This is a closed session in regards to conference with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 as an FYI. And so with that said, we will adjourn, and I will ask for a moment of silence in honor and in memory of Bruce Waters. Thank you, everyone. With that, we will conclude and adjourn. Council will go to closed session. There will be no reportable action to come back out. And at this time, we stand in adjournment to our next regular City Council meeting, which will be held on July 26th at 2022 at 7 p.m. Everybody enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good week and be safe.